Bronco Nation, my game review for Boise State versus San Diego State. Boise State winning this game 56-24, a convincing win for Boise State at home. This was a complete win for Boise State, both in the offensive performance, which we will review, the defensive performance, and at times in the special teams, so there were some elements that we're going to look at as well. But this was a complete win for Boise State, 56-24, and it wasn't even that close. This was a game that Boise State could have won, 56-10, but backup defenders in the second half, they're giving up some scores, and that's okay. Get some guys some experience, give up a couple of scores. It doesn't impact the total results here, which was clearly a dominant win for Boise State, and it couldn't have come at a better time. The CFP rankings release this week, November 5th, first rankings of the season that actually matter, away with the AP poll and all of its follies this year. The CFP committee rankings are finally coming out, and I think this is going to present a Boise State team that has looked not just as a one-player driven program like they have for some part of the season, but in this game they looked like a complete team, and specifically offensively. San Diego State to a certain extent bottling up. Ashton Jeanty still had almost 150 yards rushing while injured, but to a certain extent bottling up Ashton Jeanty, and it didn't matter. Maddox Matson and this passing game having a career performance tonight, and Boise State proving that they are a complete offensive package, that the passing game is not just a supplement to the running game, but in itself it is a lethal offensive weapon, and that was proven quite succinctly tonight with Maddox Matson throwing for 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards passing. This was an incredible performance. So we're going to go through offense, defense, special teams, review each of these areas, provide a grade to each of them, and also look how Boise State performed against my keys to the game. Before we go any further, just a shout out to the score prediction this week. There were a lot of really, really good ones. I know a couple people were saying that their score prediction was perfect right until San Diego State scored that last touchdown, that it ruined everything. I know that's unfortunate. It is good to get some guys experience. There's mostly backups in at that point, but it's good to get some guys experience. But somebody actually got really close, 1 point away from nailing this score prediction. Epic Connections 2492. They, not just in their score prediction, but in their overall prediction, their analysis that they provided, they pretty much nailed it. I might have to go to them for all of my projections of the future going forward. But their score prediction was Boise State 55, San Diego State 24, so 1 point away. I mean, I'm going to say that's that's pretty much perfect right there. And then their notes, they said, San Diego State tries to bottle up Ashton Jeanty, but doesn't succeed. Yeah, and at least not as well as UNLV. So that's quite clear there. They did not succeed at bottling up Ashton Jeanty, to a certain extent slowing him down, but you're not going to stop him, and it was not to the same level that UNLV did last week. Though Ashton Jeanty, again, clearly not 100%, but still 31 carries, third game in a row with 30-plus carries, 149 yards rushing, 4.8 yard average, so UNLV held him to 3.9 yard average, so 4.8 yard average, 2 touchdowns, also 2 receptions for 31 yards. And then they also added that Ashton Jeanty would have 4 rushing touchdowns, which he didn't have, 2 touchdowns, but 50% there. But what they said that kind of sums up and completes this is 4 passing touchdowns by Maddox Matson. That's exactly what we saw. So looking at the offense right off the bat, Maddox Matson, a career game for him, 4 touchdowns thrown, 24 out of 32, so only 8 incompletions there, a few drops, a couple of bad throws, but overall just a complete game, which for Maddox Matson, we have seen him stepping up. He has gotten so much better throughout as the season has progressed. The last 2 games have been 2 of the best of his entire career, and I thought last game, he was the difference maker. We won last week because of Maddox Matson. He was so key on key downs, but in this game, he was a complete quarterback throughout the entire performance and put up statistics to match that. Like I said, 307 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Also added 25 yards rushing on the ground, 6.3 yard average, all of those scrambles, none of them designed runs, but 0 sacks and 0 interceptions. And a big part of his career day was Latrell Caples. Latrell Caples has been dealing with something throughout this season, got banged up early in the year, but he was finally back, clearly 100%, because they had him also returning punts, so they wouldn't do that unless they thought that he was completely ready to go. Resuming his punt returning duties there, and he looked like he was back to his full form, to that form that we saw a couple of seasons ago before his injury. 6 receptions, 90 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. If you look at all of his games coming into this one, he had 157 yards receiving and 0 touchdowns. And he had, again, 90 tonight and 3 touchdowns. Incredible performance for Latrell Caples. There's some other standout performers as well for Boise State. Cam Camper continuing to be a reliable target for Boise State. Max Madsen almost had him on a deep. It was a long throw. It actually overthrew Cam Camper. So anybody that wants to talk about arm strength for Max Matson, it was not on display in that one. He clearly had the arm strength, too much actually, overthrew Cam Camper. So that would have been a long touchdown. One of the few poor throws there from Max Matson. But Cam Camper, still a great performance. 4 receptions for 50 yards. And then Prince Strawn, the last 3 games, he has had 3 out of the 4 games that he's played. There was one game in between that kind of broke the streak, but 3 out of the 4 games that he's played, he has had 40 or more yards receiving. And tonight, 4 receptions for 49 yards and a touchdown, which is quite impressive considering that coming into the season, the first 2 games, he had back-to-back games where he only had 12 yards receiving. So he has clearly worked his way into this receiving lineup. He has looked very, very good while doing it, clearly getting open, showing the flashes that we saw last season towards the end of the year. And a couple other guys also having some great games. Penry, 3 receptions, 28 yards, his 3rd game with 3 or more catches. Tight end Matt Wagner, the freshman, he looked great last game. He had a nice 28-yard reception, had to go up and get it, and he looked great today. 2 receptions for 23 yards, and if a holding penalty hadn't wiped out another reception, he would have had like 3 receptions for 30 or 40 yards, because he had a 15-plus yard reception there that unfortunately was wiped out by a holding penalty on Ashton Jeanty. But then also Bolt 1 for 18, and then Bates 1 for 11, and then he also rushed for 9 yards. So this was a complete offensive performance for Boise State. Pretty much every single drive that Boise State went out, they scored on except for 2. They had 2 drives where they punted, and then a drive that they got the ball back with 28 seconds, something like that on the clock. They ran 1 play, and then the time ran out. So don't really count that one. So out of all their drives today, only 2 of them did not end on scores. And Boise State actually scored on their 3 first drives to start the game, which included a pick 6 on defense. So 28 points right off the bat, got ahead on a huge lead, massive momentum, and San Diego State was just never able to come back. But again, in that first half for Boise State offensively, what we saw was a balanced attack. Boise State came out of the gate, first play, throwing the ball, 15-yard reception to Cam Camper. And Ashton Jeanty, to a certain extent, was bottled up. A little, slowed down, not having the huge explosive performance that we have seen out of him in the past. Part of that was the fact that he was injured, but also part of that was that was the look defensively that San Diego State was giving. I mean, at one point, they were sending 9 guys to go and tackle, and they had nobody back to stop the passing plays, and Boise State made them pay. And what we saw out of this Boise State offense today is a complete offensive package that is going to make them not just a team that can rise into the top 25, that can run through the Mountain West, but a team that can go out and win a CFP. Ashton Jeanty was going to get you to a CFP, and you're going to need him to continue to have a big performance in that game whenever Boise State gets there. But you're not going to win the CFP off of one player. You need a complete team to do that. Boise State's defense has been stepping up. We're going to get to them here in a moment. But offensively for Boise State, you needed a complete offense performance. You needed a quarterback. Fans have been complaining that was the element that Boise State was missing, and it was clearly shown today that they have a quarterback that can run this offense when Ashton Jeanty is bottled up. That first drive for Max Matson, 15-yard reception pass to Cam Camper. Ashton Jeanty breaks a couple here and there. That first run for him broke a bunch of tackles and went out for an 8-yard run. You could really see that it impacted him. He had to go to the sideline. They had to adjust his strap on his arm, the elbow clearly giving him some issues. But then Max Matson finding the touchdown through the air. Second drive as well. Ashton Jeanty has some nice power runs, but he's not breaking it out big. Matt Wagner, 13-yard reception off the fake pitch. The defense is eyeing Ashton Jeanty and opening up options in the passing game. And then Cable's a 20-yard touchdown off a fake handoff to Ashton Jeanty. Fake the handoff, roll out, throw the deep ball to Trail Caples. And then drive number 3, Max Matson's legs getting Boise State the 3rd down and 3rd and 8, scrambling out of that. We saw that so many times today. San Diego State, to their credit, they are a good defense. They had 28 sacks coming to this game, and I thought they could add a couple at least in this game, and they were clearly trying to. A lot of pressure on a Boise State offensive line that's banged up. From what I'd read, they were dealing with a couple injuries today as well, some new faces on that offensive line, but Boise State's offensive line giving Maddox Matson enough time, and then the awareness, which puts Maddox Matson on a next level, that sensing of the pressure, and making the smart move with the ball, whether that's to hold on to it, roll out, and wait for the pass to open up, like we saw, especially there on that final drive number 5, where he broke a sack, rolled out, and threw a perfect pass for a first down to Penry right at the line of scrimmage, and then followed up the next play with almost the exact same play. Didn't necessarily have to break a sack, but rolled out and threw another great ball to Cam Camper there on the back end that time. But whether it's rolling out, holding on the ball and making the throw, throwing it away like we saw him do a couple of times, or just taking off and running it and getting the first down with his legs, such an underrated part of Maddox Madsen's game. We saw all of that in this game. And for the first half, Ashton Jeanty didn't have a terrible first half. He had somewhere between 60 and 80 yards rushing, somewhere in that range. But the Boise State offense was dominant and unstoppable because, while Ashton Jeanty was out there having solid performance like he always does, the Boise State passing game was finally showing that they are on rhythm. There are so many weapons in this Boise State room. We knew that coming into this season, this Boise State wide receiver room was going to be one of the deepest that we'd ever seen for Boise State, and it just took them a while to figure themselves out, to get that chemistry, which of course was not able to be built because of the quarterback battle coming into the season. You're not able to develop that awareness between you and the quarterback, that trust system, which is so key in the passing game, especially when you start talking about those mid-range deep passing. That's so much about it is just timing and connection between you and the quarterback that just wasn't able to be developed. But now that we've come into the second half of the season, Boise State has such a deep roster of threats that they can go after, and more being added every single game. I mean, Matt Wagner, right? He's a guy that really didn't have anything coming into this into the last couple of games, and then last week a nice 28-yard reception, and then he's targeted twice. He's 3 actual throws to him, just one wiped out by holding, and he's clearly become a part of the offense himself. So Boise State's depth is not just Camper anymore. You've got Caples, you've got Strawn, you got Bolt, you've got Penry, you got Louder. Bates is around for a good play here and there, and now you've got Wagner stepping up as well. There are so many weapons, and anybody can break you. And the defense is clearly showing it. It's not just struggling because they're keying in on Ashton Jeanty. There were times when they took Ashton Jeanty out of the game. They ran the 5 look. Remember the infamous 5 look that didn't work versus Oregon because they just didn't have the wide receiver, the chemistry, or the experience built in by the wide receivers to be able to find the openings and get themselves open. And yet Boise State in the 5 look today, now I understand San Diego State defense versus Oregon defense, but still Boise State in the 5 look today without Ashton Jeanty on the field, San Diego State back in coverage, and they're still eating them up on the ground without anything that San Diego State can do to stop them, because this passing game has shown that it can now stand alone by itself as well. And I was really impressed by drive number 5. I thought that was the best drive of the season for Maddox Madsen. Again, a drive that Ashton Jeanty, not a real factor in that one. It all came down to Maddox Madsen. He broke a sack to throw that perfect pass to Penry, then he did another one to Camper, then he scrambled for 16-ish yards on or I guess it would have been 14 yards there on a 3rd and 13, and then he had a perfect throw to Bolt after a holding penalty, had pulled Boise State back. He threw a perfect ball to a Austin Bolt who was covered. The defender was all over him, and Maddox Madsen threw it to the only place that you could put that ball. Perfect throw right in the chest. And then another touchdown to Caples, and that drive number 5 there for Boise State to end the half. That was all Maddox Madsen in that one, proving again that this is a Boise State offense that is balanced and complete. Now Boise State in the second half, they come out with a goal. They are going to establish Ashton Jeanty. He's played his part. He's been involved in pass blocking. He's gone out for the passes. He has done what he needed to establish a Boise State offense as a new look offense. Not new to this season, but not new to Boise State fans. What we saw in that first half, that's the Boise State offense of old. I mean, maybe throw in a couple more deep balls in there, but other than that, it's the Boise State offense of old. The strong running back, Doug Martin in the backfield that you can hand the ball to, and he's going to get you your 4 or more yards or break one loose, but a solid, dependable passing game with a deep wide receiver roster where you're spreading the ball all over the field. And I'm not saying that Maddox Madsen is Kellen Moore, because somebody in the comments is going to say that. I'm not saying that Maddox Madsen is Kellen Moore, but when you're looking at offensive styles, and that was the Boise State offense that we are used to seeing. That's what we saw in the first half. Now, second half, we saw what we've seen most of the year. Boise State had the lead at that point. Whatever the score was, 35, something like that, to 10, I think. Maybe it was 42 at that point. But Boise State had the lead. They knew they were winning this game. They weren't really at a point of pulling Ashton Jeanty in the first half kind of situation. They weren't that big of a lead, and that was never going to be on the table. But they clearly came out with a mantra of, okay, we're going to run the clock, but we're going to establish Ashton Jeanty. We're going to give him his Heisman moments. And Ashton Jeanty, the defense is going to get worn down the more they have to play against him. But he looked stronger in that second half. And Boise State ran an offense that we are used to seeing most of the season, where it's mostly Ashton Jeanty running the ball, and then the passing game supplementing on third down when he's not if he's not able to get you that first down on first or second. And so that's what we saw most of the first half. Right off the bat, that pitch to Jeanty there, and then there was a chance to throw a touchdown to Jeanty. One of those few moments in the game, Max Manson just wasn't all there in the passing game. There's a couple of those, but that was one of those few. Ashton Jeanty wide open on the left side, but I like that they didn't throw it to him because they gave him an opportunity to run it in, which I think is a much more important stat when you're looking at the overall rushing statistics. So that's what the passing, the receiving stats, I mean, those will be taken into account. But what you care about primarily when you're looking at the Heisman race is all the rushing column stats. And so I kind of liked that Maddox Manson didn't see him. He was wide open. They should have thrown the ball to him. But I kind of like that they didn't see him because it allowed Ashton Jeanty to probably the easiest touchdown he's had all season. I don't know why he was so wide open. Jogged into the end zone completely untouched. And then second, and Ashton Jeanty on that drive also had a big run, one of his few big runs of the night. One where he fought through that injury. Every time he hit the ground, he was getting up so slow. You could see him not having that next step speed necessarily because he is hurt right now, but playing strong, playing through it because he wants to, because he needs to. He is clearly chasing that Heisman goal. Otherwise, he would have been out after the first half, or they'd come out in the second half and thrown the ball maybe a little bit more to take the pressure off of him. But he's clearly out there saying, give me this football. I want to go and get this objective. I think I said in my preview that the Heisman wasn't a primary motivator. I am still saying that Ashton Jeanty is a team player. As he is too humble and too good of a person to have any other focus than the team winning. But in addition to that, he clearly has the Heisman as a primary motivator this season, because otherwise you wouldn't have seen him 31 carries. He didn't need 31 carries. Previous two games, we needed him to have 30 plus carries. This game, he could have had 25 carries, 105 yards, 110 yards, and left. But he pushed to 31 because he needs 31 so he can continue on his track towards Heisman here. But he had a big run in that first drive of the first half where he stiff-armed a defender with his left arm, the one that is injured, pushed him through the ground, powered through two more tackles for a 28-plus yard run, somewhere in the 30s range yard run there. It wasn't, to the house touchdown, but it was what you expect from Ashton Jeanty, multiple broken tackles on for a long offensive play, creativity, and just explosiveness. And the fact that he did that with the hurt arm and all the injuries that he's dealing with, or not injuries, it's just the arm, but the heavy workload, the fatigue, 3+ games of 30+ yards rushing, carrying the hammer out for a reason because of that, and then also having the injury and stiff arming someone through the injury to stay upright and keep going for the long run just shows you what an ultimate competitor is. And honestly, considering everything that he had to deal with, an offensive line that continued to be further depleted in this game, an injury, the fact that UNLV was throwing everyone, they were giving up everything in the passing game because they were putting everybody down on the line to stop Ashton Jeanty, and he still had almost 150 yards rushing. It's one of the most impressive things I've ever seen out of a running back. To see him do that at 85% strength is absolutely mind-blowing, and this was another Heisman performance. And if the Heisman voters are not just looking at the statistics, but they're watching the games, and I think more and more of them are, they will have seen a running back that is clearly Heisman worthy. He has the statistics, but he also is playing at a level that few players in the country could match at 100%, and certainly none of them would be matching with a 85% or injury situation that he's dealing with right now. So outstanding game overall for this Boise State offense. You got to see Malachi Nelson coming in there on the last drive for Boise State, or second to last drive. 2 of 2, 15 yards passing, had a really nice pass to Bates, led the team down for a touchdown run there by Tyler Crow. Tyler Crow also having another big performance in this game, another huge contributor, not just from that fullback position, but also putting up the statistical yards as well. Touchdown and 5 carries for 14 yards and a catch for 4 as well. So outstanding performance overall, just top to bottom. But the most impressive thing out of this, in addition to watching Ashton Jeanty do what he does, even with an injury, was seeing a complete, balanced Boise State offense that you're not going to be able to just come out and line up against Ashton Jeanty. But Dirk Cutter has adjusted incredibly to teams thought they had found a way to stop Boise State. They saw the Hawaii games, and so UNLV said, okay, we're going to copy that blueprint. And they did an okay job. So San Diego State said, okay, we're going to copy the Hawaii and the UNLV blueprint. And Dirk kind of said, okay, you can try, but tell you what, we've got some other offensive weapons as well, which if we release them, you're not going to stop them either. And that's what we saw on this Boise State balanced attack today. So I don't know what team's going to do going forward because the Hawaii blueprint has failed. Boise State is more dangerous than they were before that game. And this is a Boise State team that is going to continue to see holes opening for Ashton Jeanty because now you have to take into account the passing game. And so I think that you're going to see Ashton Jeanty as he continues to recover from this injury, but also his teams defensively just cannot stack the box and win. You're going to see Ashton Jeanty continuing to resume that first half, which was simply teams not knowing how to stop him. Well, now they know, but if they do that, they won't stop the pass. And so you're going to see Ashton Jeanty picking back up that pace on the back half of the season here. So A+ performance offensively for Boise State, 541 yards of offense, 322 yards passing, 219 yards rushing, total balanced performance with a passing game proving that it was a lethal weapon in this massive matchup. All right, so defensively for Boise State, this was a strong performance for them as well. If you take out those last 2 drives of the game, which were against primarily backups for Boise State, they hold San Diego State to 10 points and only 127 yards of offense. And most of that 127 came on 2 big plays, a deep 41-yard pass that they on Ty Benesfield there on drive number 5, and then a 45-yard run by Cooper, one of his 2 really good runs of the night there. If you take away the second half performance there, or at least those last 2 drives, and only to consider when Boise State's primary starters were on the field, it's 127 yards, and 85 of that came on, or 86 of those yards came on 2 plays. This was a incredibly impressive, dominant performance for a Boise State defense coming up against a San Diego State team that showed some flash versus Washington State. I mean, this was not a team that you were going to see as someone you could just necessarily run over. That wasn't necessarily the expectation. I know that Vegas was saying for a big win here, but San Diego State showed that they could step up in a big game, and they played well versus Washington State. I know it was at home on that terrible field, and that probably slowed Washington State down a little bit, but San Diego State showed that they have some flash offensively. I mean, Cooper, he's not Ashton Jeanty, and he's not the best running back in the Mountain West, but he is a solid competitor out there, and San Diego State had some offensive potential, and Boise State completely shut them down in this game. Now, overall offensively, San Diego State had 256 yards total of offense, 155 yards passing, 101 yards rushing, and then, of course, 24 points. But again, most of that came 129 yards of that came on the last 2 drives, primarily against Boise State backups. What I saw out of this Boise State defense, I didn't see a ton of statistically massively impressive individual performances. Tubner once again led all tacklers, but it wasn't the huge, 14 tackles that he had versus UNLV, 6 tackles and an interception. Jalen Virgin-Morgan, who was one of my key players of the game for Boise State coming into this matchup, he had a huge game. He was all over the field, had some huge, massive moments in this one, but statistically, 3 tackles, 1.5 sacks. Simpson seemed to have a massive role, but when you look at the statistics, only the 2 tackles in this game. But Boise State, as a team defense, you talk about that offense, right? Not just being reliant on one player or a few key players, but stepping up as a total unit. That's what this Boise State defense did. So many key moments throughout the night. Early on in the game, Rodney Robinson almost has a pick. I think that maybe if you watch that back a little slow on replay, live, it looked like he got a little closer than he did. I think it was more of a diving deflection, but, had the ball touch his hand, so potential for a pick. McCoy definitely had a near pick. That hit him in the body. I don't think he was really necessarily completely aware of where the ball was, but McCoy had early on in the game almost had a pick. We'll talk about when he made up for that a little bit later on. Second drive, first is 3-and-out punt. Second drive, Tubner, and then Hassan, both of them stop Cooper on back-to-back runs. They do have a fake punt, but then the coverage forces two incomplete passes. Simpson stops up on the screen, and they have to punt the ball after the fake. Just it goes for nothing. And that was what was so impressive with Boise State coverage. I talked about last week how, and even the week before, how impressed I was by the Boise State secondary. And I said that last week, the Boise State secondary stepped up in a way we haven't seen all season, that they've turned a corner, and now we're seeing a Boise State secondary that's not just that's certainly not a liability like they were at some points in the season, and not just a contributor, but actually a key factor in these wins. And I said we saw that last week. Well, we certainly saw it tonight. San Diego State in this game had 16 passes incomplete. That is their most all season long. And again, only 155 yards passing, and most of that coming on one deep throw allowed and then 2 drives in the second half. Boise State shut San Diego State down. Their offensive passing coming into this game was a huge factor in their performance. 1,240 yards passing, 62.6% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I'm not saying that it's the best passing performance Boise State has seen, but it's clearly a solid passing game. But that is not what we saw in this game. 2 picks coming into it. Boise State had 2 picks in this game. Martin McCoy, drive number 3, pick 6. Picks the inside pocket of the wide receiver, runs a 30-yard pick 6 back for an interception, back for a touchdown. I will have to go back, and I didn't do it before I started the video. I should have, but I didn't go. Don't know when Boise State returned a interception for a touchdown, when the last time that was, but it's been a while. And Boise State has not had a lot of interceptions by their corners this year. They had some for their linebackers. Tubner had one, but not a lot of interceptions coming into this game. Well, they had 2 in this one, and honestly, like we said, a couple of near picks on that first drive. There was another one late in the game. I think Zion Washington, that first drive of the second half, almost had a pick. Boise State could have had 5 interceptions in this game. The Boise State secondary stepping up in such a huge way. The defensive line, drive number 4, Feely and Callahan combining for a huge sack, -9 yards there. And then that forced the interception, the deep throw that Alexander Tubner picked off. Simpson on the tackle on the screen. Then Jalen Virgin Morgan, a great sack there to end the first half. San Diego State had scored a couple of points. They'd scored 10 points there. They were starting to show some momentum. Boise State had regained the momentum with that last drive there of the half, but they had a weird kick. They had several weird kicks, kind of a little bit of regression special teams-wise, but they had a couple weird kicks where they allowed the ball to be caught short by the up men to return 12 of 15 yards, which now puts you almost at midfield. So San Diego State had an opportunity, had a little bit of time on the clock. They could have thrown the ball short, 10, 15 yards, and then set themselves up for a long throw into the end zone. But Jalen Virgin Morgan shut all of that down with a 6-yard sack, which at that point bled the clock out, and they were able to go into the half. And so into the second half as well, prior to the backups coming in, Washington had that near pick. Jalen Virgin Morgan had a huge sack there, first drive of the game. First drive of the half there, second half for San Diego State. And Zion Washington breaks up the hook and ladder. So much disrespect. So, like we talked about, San Diego State not being scared of the blue because they've won here a couple of times. But a little bit disrespectful to throw the hook and ladder on our turf. Throw that on the blue field. And they paid for it because Zion Washington sniffed it out, came down, and made the tackle. It was like a 1-yard play on the hook and ladder. It was just a great performance back-to-back. Shea Oladipo, to kind of throw out another name here in the second half, had a huge hit on a pass breakup. I would not be shocked. I know he's already done it this season, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him carry out the hammer next week, because that was a massive, massive hit to break up the pass there. Yeah, drive number 3, drive number 4. Boise State gave up a bunch of fourth downs. Statistically, they were 6 of 6 allowing fourth downs. But one of those was a fake. Great fake. Boise State got back at them later. We'll talk about that here in a second in the special teams. Great fake, but all of the converted fourth downs that were actually offense on the field, defense just being out of position for whatever reason, all of that was in the second half and those last 2 drives for San Diego State when the backups were in, getting valuable experience. Still had some great moments. Martin Yu had a huge tackle for a loss. He's going to be a great threat, a great player for Boise State, definitely coming into next season and potentially continue to build up and develop himself this year. So defensively for Boise State, solid A performance. What happened on those last 2 drives still happened, still counts, even though the backups. So unfortunately, that's going to keep them from getting that A+, but I mean, super close. And for the starters, it's an A+ performance for Boise State. All right, so special teams wise here, before we look at the keys to the game, Boise State in this game, overall special teams, Joe Dalmas, no field goals, kicked all of his extra points, so, kind of an NA there. James Ferguson Reynolds, again, returning after playing last week for UNLV, continuing into his second game back from injury. 2 punts for 44.5 yards and a average and a long 46, which included a punt that he very wisely ran that ball to the left side, knowing he could get it away, allowed his punt return coverage to get downfield to cover the ball. After that first punt that he had, they had a long punt return on it. The coverage wasn't really quite in position. They allowed a 15-yard punt along the left side. So on this one, to give them time to get down, looked like a designed play. Could have been escaping from coverage, but to me it looked like a design play. Ran to the left side with the speed he has and those Aussie rules genes that he knows he can get that ball out of there, and then toe punted that thing down for 43 yards. I mean, the way under so much pressure, we've seen it before, but under so much pressure, running while punting the ball, not just like kind of a little bit of a trot up, but a full on run and punting the ball out. And then because the coverage team was down there, as soon as the ball hit, it rolled and rolled and rolled, and there was nobody down there for San Diego State to cover it. Really, I think one of his most impressive punt of the game and one of his most impressive punts of the season overall. So that was a highlight, and Boise State also had another highlight when Notarani, who had 3 tackles this game, and good performance for him overall as well. But Notarani faked a punt. I don't know if Boise State's done that. I think that's the first time they've done that this season. I'm not remembering. So they definitely the first time they've faked a punt this year. And Notarani, the same play. I mean, the disrespect for Boise State to take the same play that San Diego State ran, and then Notarani does the same exact one, snaps it to the up man, runs it in for a first down there to continue a drive. That drive ended up being complete. I think that one ended up in a touchdown there. So that was another highlight. But this was a little bit of a regression for Boise State on special teams. They did allow the fake punt, got back at them, but they allowed a fake punt, so out of position there. The short kicks just did not make sense. Boise State was kicking the ball out the back of the end zone. That was great. San Diego State starts at the 25. Okay. There's no long, dangerous returns. I liked what I saw out of that. And then Boise State intentionally, very intentionally so, went to a short punt return or short kickoff that was giving San Diego State the ball at the 40 to 50. And San Diego State had one long kick return for 46 yards that was not kicked out of the back of the end zone. That was kicked short, not as short as the other ones, but short of the goal line, and allowed San Diego State to return. That was 46 yards. And then they had a return of 14 and a return of 12. And every single one of San Diego State's returns in this game, because even the 14 and 12 were kicked short, every single return put San Diego State at or beyond their 40-yard line. Very, very mind-boggling. It looked intentional, and I didn't like it at all because it had massive negative repercussions for Boise State. If Boise State's offense hadn't been as dominant as they were, and if Boise State's defense hadn't been able to shut down San Diego State the way that they had, that could have backfired on them. It could have been a negative play. So even though this is a huge positive win for Boise State, massive win, great resume builder for the playoffs. Even though this is one to be celebrated, we still have to look at the things that give us pause for concern and some of the negatives that need to be built on and corrected for going on into next week. And that was one of them. That was just one of those plays not one of them, but that series of plays to kickoff, just not what you wanted to see there from the Boise State kickoff team. They also allowed that long 46. They allowed that punt return. So there were a few negatives here. So overall for the Boise State special teams, going to give them a B- because you did have a fake punt, which was successful. That was fantastic. And then James Ferguson Reynolds, great as always, and great to see him doing that rollout punt and getting it away in such an impressive way and have it roll down the field. So even though there were quite a few compiling negatives there, still giving them a B- performance on special teams. All right, so to wrap up here with the keys of the game, time for the balanced attack offense. I've hit on this very, very many times in my review. Boise State clearly focused on presenting a balanced front in this game. A+ performance overall. Make Cooper prove it. Shut down the pass. Cooper had 16 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. Most of that coming off of one long run in the first half and then the 2 drives on the back end. I think they had their backup in there at the final drive. So most of his 94 yards coming on one long 41 yards. Otherwise, Boise State held him to 53 yards rushing in this game. Really, really strong performance. And part of the reason that San Diego State was not able to get anywhere is because when they did go to the passing game, they completed it 16 times. They threw 2 picks, and they only were able to complete for 155 yards, 2 touchdowns. Both of those coming in the second half on the final 2 drives there. A long touchdown allowed, so a deep touchdown allowed there, and then I think Cooper had a touchdown there, drive number 3, and they threw a touchdown on the first half. But so 2 touchdowns overall allowed, one of those against the backups, but 155 yards total overall. And again, most of that coming either against backups or off of one big play. So A+ performance. They shut down the pass. They made Cooper attempt to prove it. He still had a nice game, primarily because of one nice long run that he had. He had a solid performance overall, but Cooper was not able to prove that he was the best running back in the Mountain West. That has been quite clearly proven false in this matchup, and San Diego State leaving with a loss, and Cooper a loss on that one as well. And then get more creative in the run game. Now, Boise State wasn't necessarily doing this to the level that I think some people wanted. There were still quite a few runs up the middle, but we did see some intentionality here from Boise State to get more creative in the running game. Obviously, you had Maddox Madsen scrambles, and you can't give the running game credit on that because that's just him creating. But there were several runs to outside that just weren't effective today. Boise State, I think, emphasized that even maybe a little bit more than we've seen in other games. At least that was the impression that I got. And then Ashton Jeanty actually scoring on a touchdown, which was an option pitch. So drive number 3 that he scored on, that was an option pitch. It wasn't just a pitch. Maddox Madsen rolled left like he was potentially going to run. He didn't run very far, but ran far enough to make the defender make a decision and then pitched the ball out to Jeanty. We haven't really seen that this season. It's something I called for in my preview, and we saw it in this one. We saw Bates again being used running around the backside for the wide receiver run there. Boise State, I think, intentionally being more creative in the running game. I think this was an emphasis for them, especially as San Diego State showed that they were starting to shut down the standard run, especially up the middle, defenders in the backfield, trying to give them pause. And I thought that we saw an intentional effort to be more creative. They definitely have more room to work with there. We didn't see a lot of shifts there on the offensive line. I think they have more room that they can work into being more creative. I would love to see more of those option runs where maybe Max Madsen keeps it with some more designed QB runs, which I think he is capable of, as he's proven with his scrambling ability, which would also, I think, open up some opportunities for Jeanty on the outside. So I would love to see Boise State continue to push that, but I thought we saw an intentional effort overall for Boise State in this one to focus on trying to open up the running game, and it'll be a little bit more creative. So overall for Boise State in this performance, a fantastic game, a great one to watch as a fan. Bronco Nation, just been so incredible. Another sellout crowd. I think was it 36,000, 37,000 something announced in attendance for tonight. Another huge performance from the Bronco Nation fans in the stands to help rally their team that had a couple of games of 28 and 29 points, but at home, Boise State wins big. Every game this season for Boise State has been 45 or plus more points on the blue. They were averaging 54.3 points per game on the blue, and this one's no exception. Another 50-plus performance, 56-24, and I think that we are all getting very excited now for the matchup next week, when Boise State will be taking on the dreaded Nevada Wolfpack on the blue. Jeff Choate returning home to a not-so-warm welcome, and we'll see how that game ends up playing out, and I cannot wait to preview it. So make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you keep an eye out for that game preview coming out here in the next few days. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, go Big Blue!